Hi everyone, and welcome to The Movement Image. Cinema has a unique ability to change our perspective. By placing us in unfamiliar territory, movies can open our eyes to truths we've never noticed, but have been there all along. For more than 25 years, Hirokazu Koreeda has been doing exactly that, making films that offer nuanced insights into modern life, portraying social problems and underrepresented peoples with intense emotional gravity. Koreeda's films capture these problems in a way that humanizes what's overlooked, helping us recognize and empathize with common and uncommon problems. Koreeda's ability to approach social problems with delicacy and emotional depth has always interested me. I set out on this project because I wanted to know how Koreeda's films accomplish this feat. In looking through his film history, a number of common themes and techniques emerged. These themes and techniques build the connection we find in Koreeda's films, and elevate him from being just another director to one of the greatest directors of his generation. In this video, we'll look at these themes and techniques to gain a better understanding of Koreeda's visual style and screenwriting. Let's dive in. Koreeda's films focus on the connections we form with people and how our experiences shape these connections in unexpected ways. They impress emotions on us that are lived in and honest, where tensions between loved ones aren't saccharine leave it to beaver prescriptions, but real, with real resentments, real reconciliations, and the accompanying stressors we experience with those we're closest to. This speaks to a theme in Koreeda's work that shouldn't surprise any of us. The connections we make in life are imperfect. By drawing our attention to the way circumstances align and connections are made, Koreeda explores how often we take these connections for granted, and how others can't replace these connections once they're gone. It's something we see in almost all of his films. In Mabarosi, the widower replaces Yumiko's dead husband. In Still Walking, Ryota's older brother is replaced by the bumbling man his brother saved from drowning. In Nobody Knows, 13-year-old Akira replaces the parents who have abandoned him and his 3 siblings. And it's not always someone filling a role not originally meant for them. Sometimes, Koreeda's characters work to rebuild connections that can't be replaced. In I Wish, 2 brothers work to reunite their parents, because nothing can replace their family's bond. In After the Storm, Ryo can't move on from his ex-wife, and we watch him scheme for reconciliation throughout the film. Perhaps the best example of how Koreeda uses social connections is in Like Father Like Son, where he leads us through both sides of this dynamic. After finding out that their 5-year-old children were switched at birth, 2 families exchanged their sons in an attempt to honor their bloodlines. But after spending 5 years caring for and loving their non-biological children, neither family can break the bonds that have already been built, and both families struggle with missing their non-biological children. Ultimately, this leads the families to a shared understanding that, through a twist of fate, they've been connected irrevocably. Using his visual style, which includes both cinematography and editing, Koreeda deepens the connections we see in his films. One example is in Like Father Like Son, where Koreeda uses paths to emphasize distance and reconciliation. At one point, Ryota has an important conversation with his non-biological son, Ryusei. They're separated by a small break in a path, but still close enough that Ryota can apologize to Ryusei for his failings as a father. Ryusei listens silently as Ryota's words sink in. Once Ryota has finished his apology, their 2 paths merge again, signaling their reconciliation and that they're moving forward together. Techniques like these are regularly used by Koreeda. He often frames his scenes using the paths and bodies of water in his landscapes, which also adds a psychological element, emphasizing limited options and personal struggles. In Shoplifters, when Shota talks to his surrogate father, Osamu, about not wanting to steal anymore, we see him on one path, Osamu on another, and a river just beyond. These 2 paths and the limited horizon reinforce the psychological distance Shota keeps from Osamu, knowing that getting too close would lead to a futureless life of crime. We see paths used again when Shota finally does make a change in his life, literally jumping from one path to another. Another example is found in Still Walking. In this movie, Ryota's father, Kyohei, regularly passes other paths on his daily walks, but always takes the same route. A stubborn, unimaginative man, His interactions with the world mirror his personality. When he and Ryota finally talk about their differences, Kyohei almost walks by the path that leads to their conversation. Arriving on the beach, their path is limited by the ocean's edge, illustrating the limits of their reconciliation. After a lifetime of mutual resentment, one conversation can only patch up so much. A similar technique is used with telephone lines. Koreeda uses a lot of lines in his filmmaking, and one way he adds tension to outside shots is through telephone lines, which break up the landscape. Whether it's an open sky or city setting, telephone lines are used to frame the scene, fixing our focus on a specific area and adding emphasis to what's happening. There are some great examples of this. In Nobody Knows, telephone lines cut between individuals as Akira and Yuki take their first trip outside, reflecting their isolation from the rest of society. In Like Father, Like Son, telephone lines add weight to the open sky as Ryota transports his biological and non-biological sons, building the tension of a difficult moment. In Shoplifters, telephone lines draw Nobuyu and Hatsui into a tighter frame as they talk about the nature of their relationship. Through use of this simple visual cue, Koreeda conveys how these characters are connected to each other and to the world around them. Through the way he captures social connections with plot devices and visual style, Koreeda pivots the atomic family from its idealized form. By disrupting preconceived notions about how families should look, Koreeda explores the role of family in its perfect and imperfect forms. As evidenced by the hardworking fathers in Still Walking and Like Father, Like Son, a perfect atomic structure doesn't always translate to a happy family. The makeshift family in Shoplifters is the opposite of this. The closeness they achieve is fraught by a life of crime, but underneath it all is something very genuine. Families aren't the only place where Koreeda likes to poke at social structure. He frequently places characters at the fringe of acceptable society in innocuous ways. With some small exceptions, like the third murder, Koreeda's characters don't do things that are downright horrible, but instead find themselves in stigmatized areas of society, forced to act in ways that are frowned upon because they have no other choice. These are people who have experienced small stumbles in life, things that are never far from something we could experience ourselves. Whether they live a life of petty crime like Shota and Shoplifters, fail to live up to expectations like Ryota in Still Walking, or are faced with circumstances entirely out of their hands like Akira in Nobody Knows, Koreeda's characters find themselves on society's periphery, and rather than being rehabilitated by their peers, they're the objects of silent ridicule. By placing characters in these situations, Koreeda's films show us our own pettiness as we stare down our noses at those experiencing hardships. Rarely, if ever, are the hardships faced by these characters openly discussed. Instead, Koreeda gives us a more conciliatory glance at their lives, and breathes empathy into their circumstances. For them, these hardships are just life. Take, for example, Nobody Knows. Nobody Knows never tells us to pity the four siblings who have been abandoned by their parents, nor is there a Hollywood-esque scene where their emotional states are described to us. Instead, we're given an honest view of their lives, illuminating the circumstances and details that make up who they are. Seeing the siblings plant flowers in styrofoam cups, or watching the youngest brother, Shigeru, check vending machines for coins, provide lived-in details of these characters' lives. Because of how Koreeda treads into their lives, we're able to make our own connections with these characters, leading to a deeper understanding of their world. There are many ways Koreeda's visual style builds our connection with and empathy towards these characters. Close-ups on hands and feet are a great example. In Nobody Knows, close-ups are used to establish emotional states and social contrasts. Hands embody the humanized emotion of these kids. The film opens on Akira's hands as he nervously fumbles a suitcase we soon learn holds his youngest brother, who's been smuggled into a new apartment. From there, the film uses hands to convey the concerns of the kids as they make purchases, refill water bottles, and, generally, grow through interaction with the world. This all leads to a climactic moment where, after an accident, touch conveys an important lesson on life and death to Akira. The siblings' humanized touch is contrasted with society's silent judgment over their appearance, which is demonstrated through shots of their shoes. In the course of the film, Akira's white shoes go from brand new to dirty and falling apart. This degradation runs parallel to the fall of Akira and his siblings in the eyes of society. We're given clear evidence of this when Akira's shoes are contrasted with those of the kids he's trying to befriend as they shine him on about wanting to hang out soon. An honest and caring child, Akira tries to work through his difficulties in exactly the way society wants, but he still can't escape their judging eyes. Close-ups are used similarly in Shoplifters. Here, characters stare into mirrors as they're acting in desirable or undesirable ways. Shota looks into a mirror as he's stealing from a grocery store at the film's beginning, and we see more mirrors as the film progresses. Mirrors when characters are lifting clothes, mirrors when characters are affectionate toward one another, and, in a likely homage to Wim Wenders' Paris, Texas, mirrors at the adult club that Aki works at. These instances speak to the self-criticism that accompanies a life of crime. It's not just society watching these characters break the law. They have to watch themselves break the law as well, and deal with the personal demons that stem from their actions. When asked about how his filmmaking captures moments like these, Koreeda said, "I'm trying to make films looking at the people in front of me, at the emotions in front of me, without preconceptions." This is significant, because the honesty of Koreeda's lens is what makes his films so meaningful. By questioning social norms that are often overlooked, Koreeda opens our eyes to areas of society where our silence or disapproval might not be appropriate. As Linda Elric noted in her essay on Koreeda's films, what fits into the accepted patterns might be rotten inside. Creating space to question society's shortcomings is hard to accomplish, but Koreeda does this with a visual style that captures how difficult it is for us to change ourselves and our circumstances. I've mentioned how paths and telephone lines indicate character longings or the multitude of choices we face in life, and Koreeda uses transit in a similar way. In Nobody Knows, transit captures both unattainable dreams and the grim reality behind those dreams. When Akira takes his youngest sister, Yuki, out on the town for her birthday, we're shown a train riding into the distance as she shares her dream to someday travel on a plane. As it moves out of frame, the train reminds us of just how many things remain out of reach for these kids. This rosy view of travel comes full circle when Akira finds himself using the same train line not to travel to a distant land, but to attend a funeral. In Still Walking, an establishing shot appears to be setting location until a train appears, followed by a cut to Ryota's family on that train. A film about the frustrations boiling beneath the surface of family life, this early shot subverts our expectations with its deceptive focal point. This deception helps set the tone for the film, initiating a skepticism that gets us questioning the appearance of things moving forward. Koreeda's use of everyday stuff like transit creates a world in flux that's further developed in his plots. In his films, difficulties are rarely introduced, but are instead something characters are already in the midst of. Families are already broken, relationships already damaged, and hardships have already set in. When we meet these characters, they're aware of their problems and are in the process of working through them. By portraying these events as yet another difficulty in a long and difficult life, Koreeda shines a light on the way we, as humans, get through adversity. Seeing characters work through adversity in this way also teaches us more about them. This means Koreeda doesn't need to write dialogue explaining what characters are going through, but instead lets cinematography capture those feelings and how characters work on and overcome them. In Our Little Sister, 3 siblings adopt their half-sister, Suzu, after the death of their shared father. Beginning as a lonely, shy child, it's clear Suzu wants friends and family, even though we never see her say this. Rather than using dialogue, Koreeda shows us this longing through Suzu's actions, which, over the course of the film, also express her growth. Many of the ways Suzu and her sisters grow together are portrayed with such relatable honesty that we hardly notice them. Shared meals, redecorating the house, and talks about relationships never blossom into dramatic events. Instead, with each shot, Koreeda slowly reveals the connection that grows between these characters in a way that's more thorough and emotionally resonant than what would be achieved through dialogue. And it's not just in Our Little Sister that relationships are built this way. Commonplace activities are something Koreeda uses to show us what's most familiar for these characters, and open their lives for observation. In Still Walking, it's the familiarity of food and cooking together that draws us into the family's relationship. In Like Father, Like Son, the work-life dynamic is shown, letting us see how two different families get through their days. In Shoplifters, Shota and Osamu hang out and chat while fishing, giving insight into both characters with their guard down. In almost all of Koreeda's films, characters engage in mundane activities to show us who they really are. By focusing on the practical and abstaining from melodrama, these simple activities build actual relationships on the screen, letting events reveal the connection that's present. In revealing connections in this way, Koreeda pulls us closer to his characters and their circumstances. His screenwriting fosters insights into social and family life, and his visual style builds on these insights, helping us recognize new perspectives and empathize with characters' circumstances. We learn that families come in many forms, and society can sometimes be too quick to judge. And this is really what Koreeda's films boil down to. In focusing on family and social standing, Koreeda unpacks two looming giants in our lives to reveal the depths of how we, as humans, are connected. As individuals, as families, and as a society.